Welcome to ITV News Central for the East Midlands. On our programme tonight, parole board under fire again as a killer who's never revealed what he did with his wife's body is sent back to jail.
The former NHS manager who spent £20,000 going private as the extent of the cancer backlog is revealed.
On World AIDS Day, there are calls for more HIV testing, and that's exactly what we'll be doing tonight.
Join me at Leicestershire Wildlife Hospital, where they've got over 200 of these poorly and underweight little baby hedgehogs.
There's 25 days to go till Christmas, and if you're looking to buy a real tree, I'll have everything you need to know about one of these.
And when it comes to tonight, as the skies clear and temperatures fall, because the ground is already wet, could there be an ice warning? Join me later and I'll let you know.
Good evening. A man whose grandfather murdered his grandmother almost 40 years ago says he's glad his grandfather's back in jail after breaching parole licence conditions. Neil Gillingham from Northamptonshire was only 7 when Russell Causley was convicted of murdering Carol Packman.
Well, Causley, now in his late 70s, never revealed where he hid his wife's body. But he was taken back into custody on Saturday, and the family is now preparing for a further parole hearing. The case follows the recent recall to prison of double child killer Colin Pitchfork from Leicestershire. And a government review of the parole board system is underway, as Wesley Smith reports.
Neil Gillingham never knew his grandmother. She'd been murdered by his grandfather, Russell Causley, before he was even born. Carol Packman went missing from her home at Christchurch in Dorset in 1985. Her body has never been found, and her killer has refused ever to reveal the whereabouts of her remains. For all his adult life, Neil, who lives in a Northamptonshire village, has fought tirelessly for answers.
You know, we're back to where we were. And as we go into the new year, we're now getting ready for another war. That's what it will be, won't it? It's a battle. Our human rights versus his. Last time his won. Let's see how ours fare. But my grandmother's still missing. 37 years next June. Grandmother's still missing. And the parole board released him 12 months ago. We said, don't. 1 million people signed the petition for Helen's Law. Nobody, no parole. It's a law with no teeth. It's not working. My grandmother was a brave woman. She was a clever woman. She didn't deserve to be killed and extinguished from this world like she has been. Her memory trampled on by my grandfather, who will one day have a grave, but she won't. How is this justice?
Neil and his mother Samantha have long called for people who refuse to reveal information about their crimes to be kept in jail. Neil is highly critical of the probation service over the release of Causley. It follows the recent recall of child killer Colin Pitchfork in neighbouring Leicestershire, who'd also been released on parole against the wishes of the families of his victims. Neil Gillingham has called for the parole board chief, Martin Jones, to resign.
The pain, the ripple is too great in our family. Honestly, I cannot describe the generational trauma that we've all suffered.
The parole board issued a statement saying they have no comment to make on the calls for Mr Jones to resign. Releasing offenders like Causley is a decision for the probation service. They told us protecting the public is our #1 priority. So when offenders breach the conditions of their release and potentially pose an increased risk, we don't hesitate to return them to custody.
If by any chance your grandfather was watching this broadcast, what would you want to say to him?
Do the honourable thing, Russell, once again. Just close the book, close the chapter of the book. Tell us where Carol is. Give us that closure.
Now, as Christmas draws closer, Neil's family must submit their reasons once more as to why they believe the man who murdered his grandmother and refused to reveal what happened to her should remain behind bars. Wesley Smith, ITV News, Northamptonshire.
Well, for more on this, let's cross to our political correspondent, Alison Mackenzie. And Alison, we were here just 2 weeks ago talking about Colin Pitchfork, and now another killer has breached his parole. What's going on?
Well, you could argue that the justice system is working effectively. A prisoner is released on licence. He breaches the terms of that licence, immediately rearrested and returned to prison. Very similar, like you say, to the Colin Pitchfork case. And that was put before Dominic Raab by MPs quizzing him in committee. They say, well, you know, what's going on, Justice Secretary? He knows there's a review, root and branch of the parole board system happening. He wouldn't be drawn on that. But he does suggest that he feels at the moment it's a presumption that the prisoner should be released unless there's evidence that there's a risk. He wants it more that the prisoner should be kept in unless there's evidence that it's safe to release them. A switch to a precautionary measure. He summed it up like this.
I think our job as a government is to protect the public. And in relation to these either very dangerous cases or very high risk and difficult to gauge the extent of risk after a considerable period of time in incarceration. I think we've got to show some humility that is incredibly difficult, and I would prefer to err on the side of public protection. I say that about all of these kinds of cases.
The parole board say they welcome the review of their system. They say it'll provide an open, transparent and fair system. It remains independent, of course, of government. But it was pointed out to MPs it's inherently difficult to assess risk. It's not an exact science. And to be fair, neither Colin Pitchfork nor Causley were actually committing offences. They were taken back before any further crimes were committed.
Alison, thank you very much. A former NHS manager